This video is going to be all about why light work does not heal the shadow. So in this case, I want to address why light work doesn't heal the shadow, because I feel like a lot of people are being misled in the spiritual community about how shadow work is done and how light work is done. Basically, people really think that certain modalities are an end-all be-all for spiritual healing, and that's just not the truth, because we have different dimensions of ourselves, different components. We have light bodies and we have shadow bodies. We have the conscious mind and we have the unconscious mind. We have the Sephiroth or the higher chakra points, and we have the Klipoth or the lower chakra points. We are multidimensional beings, and one specific type of modality is not something that's going to apply to all areas. Case in point, I actually had a client today, and obviously I'm not going to reveal that person's name, but they did share with me an experience they had when they had Reiki done. And this particular client has suffered through a lot of abuse, a lot of emotional trauma, things of that nature. And when this person received Reiki to help heal, it actually had the opposite effect. Why? Because as that Reiki moves through the different channels within the light body and it breaks loose certain blockages, emotional blockages that may have been there for a really long time, it can release the feeling and the chemicals and the energy and the very essence of the trauma and have that absorbed within the consciousness. And so what happened was this particular person, and I'm using this person as an example, became very depressed and suicidal right after doing Reiki. Now, does that mean that Reiki is not effective? No. There are a lot of people saying nowadays that it has a lot of inversions and that it was actually created by this demonic being that wants to absorb energy and all of this other bullshit. Now, I think every healing modality does have inversions because humans have had their hands in them and they manipulate and distort things for many reasons, most of all power. I also don't believe that demons or anything evil, so I really don't buy into this. Now, again, I'm not saying that there aren't inversions in Reiki, and I'm also not saying that Reiki is not beneficial. I have benefited from Reiki. I know a lot of people who have benefited from Reiki, and there are different types of Reiki and different lineages of Reiki, and it is a lineage-based system. But I digress. Light work is for the light body. Shadow work is for the shadow body. And blending the two isn't really helpful. So, should we be doing light work and light healing? Absolutely. But to use light work and light healing for the shadow isn't really going to be effective. Now, some people may say, well, I thought shadow work was all about bringing things into the conscious mind, into the light of the conscious mind. Well, that might be, but light work and the conscious mind being associated with the light is just a metaphor. Light work is literal. Light work is actually taking light, fractulated light, chi that's been fractulated, and having it channel toward another person through a person who's doing the Reiki. So this is not the same thing as shadow work. Shadow work is healing what's been repressed into the shadow. That can't be done with light work. In fact, there are a lot of people out there that are treating shadow work as light work, and it's actually causing a lot of issues, a lot of reliving of traumas. And the reason being is that people are doing things like saying, okay, well, in order to do soul fragment healing, I want you to just say, I call back all soul fragments to myself. No, don't do that. And I want to tell you guys something. When I was first starting shadow work, first learning shadow work, I made that same mistake until I realized that you cannot treat shadow healing and light healing the same. They are two totally different approaches and modalities. The reason you cannot do that with shadow work is that soul fragment retrieval is a process where you are supposed to be addressing each individual fracture of your psyche, each individual soul fragment. At what point did you fragment? Why did you fragment? How do you feel? What is it that you want? What is it that you need? How can I help you achieve that? What were we missing? What happened? And so these types of questions allow us to discover what led to the fragmentation, and that part of ourself that we see as something separate. We understand that this is really a part of ourselves. We understand that this is a part of ourselves. So what this fragment is saying, what this fragment is feeling, that is a part of ourselves, and what we're saying or wanting to say and what we feel, but we're not willing to face it. So in integrating that, then we are accepting that this is a part of how I feel, or this particular trauma happened to me at this point in time, and I am owning that, and I'm integrating that missing piece of myself for total wholeness. Now, are there cases where soul fragments should not be integrated? Absolutely. For those of you who don't know, I work with Baron Samedi. He's actually my consort in the spirit realm, and one of the things he taught me on our journeys into the underworld is that there are some soul fragments that just cannot be saved, so to speak. So at that point, you have a decision to make. Do you destroy them? Do you release them into the reincarnation portal? Or you can give them a choice, but some of them are just so distorted. There's nothing human there, or there's nothing conscious there. It's just an emotion that's repeating a destructive pattern. So in leaving it there and letting it exist, you actually create issues for yourself. And it's stuff like this that leads to us having these unconscious patterns that bring us into self-sabotage or other destructive or self-destructive behaviors. So we don't handle soul fragments by saying, all soul fragments I welcome back. How do you know that that's a soul fragment that you're supposed to welcome back? Also, let's say that all of the soul fragments are fragments you're supposed to welcome back. How are you going to handle that integration? Do you know how many different types of feelings and memories and behavior traits and traumas you're just welcoming back all at once? That's crazy. You could literally lose your mind doing that, guys. You could totally lose sense of your identity. You could have major, relapses into like post-traumatic stress disorder. You could actually trigger, like in extreme cases, mental illness, or even a loss of sense of reality. So it's really important that we do not blend the things that work for light work with the things that work in shadow, because a light worker may say, oh, I feel like somebody took my energy, so I'm going to call back to myself the energy they took and all other energy and multiple dimensions that people have taken away from me, the power that they've taken away from me, and I transmute that and I take it back. Well, that works with light work. Doesn't work with shadow work. Totally different type of healing process. Shadow work is all about acceptance and integration. And light work is a lot different. It's all about projection, illumination, and being able to basically circulate your chi, okay? Being able to circulate your chi, having balanced light energy system, having balanced energy bodies, things of that nature. Now, even when we're dealing with our shadow bodies, we're still not handling it the way we would with light work. So, for example, if I'm going into a shadow chakra, shadow aspect of my chakra, or a shadow body, okay, like the inverted part of the light body, if I'm going into that to do healing, I'm not going to handle like I would light work. I'm going to tune into that energy. I'm going to talk to it, find out what it's feeling, find out what it's holding on to, find out what it needs to move on or to heal or to let go or to accept. So it's a totally different process. I would say it's more of receptive and more quote unquote feminine, if we're going to use that. I really have been disliking using feminine and masculine terms to describe reception or projection. That also varies from culture to culture, but because a lot of people have an association with the feminine being receptive and the masculine being projective, then we'll look at it like that. Light work and the conscious mind, the sun, stars, all of that, that is masculine energy, that is projective. Projective light is projective. Light warms, light pierces, light, burns, light illuminates, light exposes, right? Darkness is feminine. It's the unconscious, it's the subconscious, it's the reception. It welcomes in, it absorbs, it receives, it consumes. Totally different energy, right? So we have to look at it like that. So how do we heal something that is receptive and unconscious? By making what's in the unconscious conscious, by addressing it, by bringing it into focus, bringing it into awareness, bringing it into alignment, but not in the way that we do with light. So with light, we can literally use light to heal and correct our light bodies. We can't do that with shadow. When I'm doing shadow work, I don't use shadow to heal my shadow in that direct way. Shadow work means I'm going into my shadow, I'm going into my unconscious mind to make things conscious so that I can heal them, so that I can have a journey of integration and wholeness. Totally different energy, totally different approach. So what's dangerous is when you have healers and teachers doing light work type modalities to heal shadow type issues or traumas. Even doing light work, guys, you have to check in and make sure that person can even handle it. Some people cannot handle light work. Some people cannot handle shadow work. You have to bring people to that point sometimes. You have to walk them through it, hold their hand, start very small and work your way up. That would be when I'm doing light work, for example, the first thing I start with is basic meditations of helping to ground, of protecting the energy, centering, basic meditation like focal point meditation, guided meditation. I might go into chakra work, energy body alignment, right? Working with the nadis or the meridians. I might then go into light merkabah activation. I might then go into accessing different dimensions and realms and activating different abilities. So it's a process. Same thing with shadow work. You might start with identifying what is shadow work. What are some of the different modalities of shadow work? Then you might go into, okay, let's start by doing a journal exercise of recognizing our triggers. Maybe we can start working with shadow totems. Then next we can actually start to meet different aspects of our shadow. Start with some inner child healing. Then we go on to our ancestors, meeting our ancestors, working with them, doing some ancestral healing. Then we go into breaking ancestral curses, soul fragment retrieval of ourselves and our ancestors. And then we go into the hell loops, breaking those curses at a deeper level, reprogramming the DNA. So this stuff happens as a process, a progression. It's not something that can be just done like snapping fingers. I'm going to send somebody some Reiki and they're magically cured. And while we're on this topic, I want to talk about exorcisms too, because this is something that I really thought about recently. A lot of times when people are doing exorcisms, they're really combating with different aspects of soul fragments that are haunting the individual because that individual has not done shadow work to heal trauma. So those schisms will literally act out and haunt and can even manifest in poltergeist activity. I don't know if you guys have ever seen, I think it's American Haunting, and it's all about this girl that was molested by her father, and she experienced such a deep psychological schism that a huge soul fragment broke off of her, which was the memory she had from the trauma, and the other part of her had no memory. And that part of her kept haunting her father, haunting the house until she would remember what happened. That is what happens when we do not face our traumas in extreme cases. So a lot of times people are trying to exorcise folks, and what they don't need an exorcism. They haven't been hexed or cursed. They need to do serious trauma healing and shadow work. They need to do inner child healing and soul fragment retrieval. They need to go in and heal those, generational trauma loops. This is the reality. So I'm not saying that we don't need to do exorcisms of any kind. I'm not saying that people don't get hex, curse, jinx, and cross. Obviously, I don't believe that because I perform this as a service. But I've actually had clients that came in that had legit astral parasites. They were removed. They had legit curses, hexes, jinxes put on them. That was removed. But I've also had clients come in and they've actually been haunted with real poltergeist activity, and it's ended up being one of their own soul fragments because they endured really intense trauma, usually sexual trauma. And I told them, look, you're going to have to heal yourself. This is going to be a process. This is not something, because this particular client, I'm not going to say any names because I don't, again, client confidentiality. But just to use this as an example, this particular client was frustrated and was like, I just don't understand why someone can't go in and just pull this off of me. And I'm like, because that's not what you're dealing with here. You're dealing with this whole energy is a result of this particular trauma. And even if this were an external force, having that unhealed area of your life has actually given an access point or an opening for that type of energy to be attracted to you. But I actually see this as being a soul fragment or a part of your shadow. I just let that client know that, even if it is an external force, if you don't heal these things, then this is not going to change. You're just going to keep being played, keep being haunted by this. This is what can happen, guys, in extreme cases of trauma. And what one person considers traumatic, another person wouldn't. And so it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be something as, intense as physical, sexual, or emotional, or verbal abuse. It could be something like just not getting what you need. It could be negligence. It could be being bullied at school. It could be just feeling like you're overlooked or you're not recognized. I mean, it can be a lot of things, something small. But if that particular event, was recorded in your unconscious and it's creating this pattern because of the trauma, and you get a soul fragment that breaks off, that soul fragment can become a problem. It can become its own entity, its own intelligence, and begin to plague you because why? Because you didn't acknowledge how that part of you felt. So that fracture began to feel like it was betrayed. That fracture begins to feel, that fragment begins to feel like it's not a part of you because it was rejected. Even though this was a coping mechanism for you, because what occurred was too painful. I'm saying all this to say that we have to be careful as healers of the different types of modalities we're using, of the different types of templates we're using, of the different types of ways that we are addressing things. We need to make sure that we know exactly what the cause is. We have to treat it like a doctor running tests, diagnosing. We have to be very mindful of how we're coming to figure things out. That's why I like to do readings, assessments, scans, visual scans, things of that nature to try to determine, okay, what's going on here. I hope that this video has been helpful for you guys. If you have any questions about light work or shadow work, or you're interested in joining Patreon where you can learn how to do this, or you want to book a session with me, maybe you feel like you need an exorcism, maybe you want a guided meditation for doing shadow work, maybe you want to book an energy healing session with me, hit me up on my website. Check out my website, thetantricdragoness.com, to book a private akashic reading or any other reading. Also, akashic portraits, consultations, shamanic journeys, starseed charts, primordial dragon fire healing, and much more. You can also subscribe to Patreon to learn how to do a lot of this yourself through various templates I've designed. Activate Diamond Consciousness, Activate the Black Flame, Journey the Underworld, Tantric Healing and BDSM, Astral Projection and Power, Shields, Cloaks, Wards, Learning Light Language, Exclusive and Premier Readings, Soul Fragment Retrieval, Advanced Ancestral Work, Creating Your Own Shamanic Sanctuary, and much more. Thanks for your support, and stay tuned for future videos.